5 years after 17-year-old Elena Martin and 18-year-old Hannah Briggs vanished without a trace, a lone camper wandered into a part of the Appalachian Trail most hikers avoid. A place where even the rangers lower their voices. And that's where he saw it. A shallow depression in the leaves. A faint drag in the soil. And beside a split beech tree, half buried under brush, he spotted a braid elastic, the exact color Elena wore the day she disappeared. Search teams rushed in, peeling back layers of earth as parents trembled nearby. Piece by piece, the forest gave up fragments of truth, items placed, moved, and hidden in ways no accident could explain. The discovery changed everything. Because whatever happened to the girls didn't start in the deep woods. It ended there. Before we go any further, if this is your first time watching one of our videos, we'd love for you to hit that subscribe button. Your support means the world to us, and it helps us bring you even more powerful stories. Stick with us till the very end, and if this story moves you, drop your thoughts in the comments and share it with a friend. They left like teenagers do, light backpacks, big plans, a playlist queued, and the kind of laughter that sounds like wine through pines. Elena tucked a stray curl behind her ear before stepping into the morning sun. Hannah checked her water bottle one last time and tossed a grin over her shoulder. They'd been planning this overnight section of the Appalachian Spur for weeks. A rite of passage. A chance to sleep under stars and prove you could handle cold toes and sore shoulders and still get up smiling. The trailhead was crowded but calm. Cars idled in the gravel lot, hikers adjusted poles, a couple with a small dog argued gently about a map. People said hi the way small towns do. A smile, a nod, nothing heavy. A woman in a ranger cap watched the girls tighten their boots and called out, "Watch the connector near mile 5, wet this time of year." Elena waved. "Thanks, we got it." Hannah looped the strap of her pack and said, "Back at dusk if not sooner." The tone was bored. Brave. The kind of easy confidence 17 and 18-year-olds were like armor. For an hour they texted photos, moss close-ups, a goofy selfie with 2 thumbs up, a short clip of fog spilling down the ridge. At 10:42 a.m., Elena sent a voice note to her mom. "We're fine, Mama. Fire looks sick at night. Promise to be careful." Her mother replied with a string of hearts and a short, indulgent warning about keeping warm. That last exchange is the kind of thing families sleep on, a soft anchor in the middle of the night. The trail behaved like it always does at first. Switchbacks that breathed easy, sunlight making lichen sparkle, the smell of wet earth and pine sap. Hikers passed them. An older couple slowed to chat. A college kid sitting on a boulder offered a granola bar and a tired grin. Conversations overlapped like birdsong. "Beautiful day, huh? Watch your step. You girls alone?" "Yeah, we're together." Small talk, nothing cinematic. But small talk is where missing stories begin. 1,000 tiny details that, when a life vanishes, people will later press like flowers between the pages of what-ifs. They reached a narrower section that skirts a rocky outcrop, a patch locals call the hollow turn. The path thins, roots braid the dirt, and the sound of the world gets quieter. An older man paused there, adjusting his binocular strap. He later told police the girls paused to look at a cascade of water, pointing and laughing softly. He noticed Elena linger longer near a stepped stone that led into a sidetrack, a little path most folks mistake for a game trail. She traced the worn rock with her fingertips, like reading Braille. The man remembered thinking, "She's curious." A careful kid. Hannah tugged Elena, and they went on. That's the last clear public snapshot anyone could agree on. 2 silhouettes folding into trees. When afternoon lazily slid toward evening and dusk started to plead light from the map, the girls had not yet returned. Their families noticed routine things that suddenly felt loud. Elena didn't answer a call at 5:12 p.m., then another at 6:03. Hannah's last selfie, a sun-bleached frame of an overlook, did not get the follow-up, "We made it back safe" text. Phones started ringing with a new urgency. Parents spoke in clipped breaths, then in held-back sobs. By 8 p.m., both families had driven to the trailhead. The ranger's office was a hum of fluorescent light and meticulous calm. A deputy took names, checked the trip plans, and sent volunteers up the nearest routes. "We'll start a grid," the ranger said, voice steady, hands making professional angles. But under the clipped coordination, the raw human stuff leaked out. Elena's mother paced, throat tight, fingers scraping a lip. She kept saying, I told her to take a jacket. Hannah's father stared at a map, mouth moving as if rehearsing where to go, his hands trembling when he clipped on a headlamp. People swapped gossip in low bursts at the picnic tables. They were fine this morning, right? Yeah, but kids wander. You sure they knew the connector? Their voices were half comfort, half accusation. The way towns try to make sense of something that shimmers out of reach. Search teams formed before dawn. Volunteers who know the woods came with coffee, granular maps, dogs that remembered paths by scent. They threaded through rhododendron and broken ferns, sweeping methodically, calling names until their throats rasped. Helicopters came the second day, blades like impatient birds. The town's face changed. A diner that served pie filled with worried faces and whispered logistics. At the gas station, 2 truckers exchanged looks, and one muttered, "That hollow turn gives me a bad feeling," and the other replied, "We all got a bad feeling now." People gasped when the volunteers widened the search and found nothing. No tarp, no dropped phone, no typical signs of a lost hiker seeking warmth. Day 3. A dog alerted near a stream and then sat, head cocked, refusing to move deeper. Volunteers later choked when they said it. It's like the animal felt the place change, like it knew to stop. A retired teacher, who'd been teaching in the area for 40 years, said quietly over coffee, "The hills shift. They can hide things." His voice had the brittle edge of someone who's been thinking about disappearance for a long time. As hours became full days, the family's grief took public form. Elena's mother folded into a chair outside the ranger's office and sobbed until her shoulders shook. Hannah's father walked to the edge of the lot and called his daughter's name into the thin, pine-scented air until his voice wore out. People gathered, neighbors, hikers, some who barely knew either girl, and offered blankets, casseroles, and an old human ritual, presents. They clustered in the rec center, murmuring, "I can't believe it," and their voices made small sounds like breaking glass. Speculation spreads fast when facts are thin. Someone claimed to have seen a camper pulling out quickly the morning after the girls vanished. Another said they saw a shadow on the rocks that didn't look right. 2 teenagers at the diner leaned over burritos and whispered, "Maybe they met someone." An older woman gave a slower, haunted look and said, "No, these hills swallow sound." The town's gossip curve bent toward fear and back toward protective denial. People asked blunt, tender questions. Did they meet someone who offered help? Did they slip on a ledge? Did the phone simply die in the trees? Investigators cataloged the tiny details with clinical hands. Last pings, camera logs, boot sizes, timestamps. But the raw human stuff lived in the open. The clothes laid out in living rooms, the voicemail messages replayed until the static replaced the voice, the neighbor's casserole left untouched on stoops. On the 4th day, a volunteer found a small scrap of fabric snagged on a root near the sidetrack Elena had touched. It was nothing dramatic. A thin strip of bright blue, torn from a cheap glove. But when Elena's mother held it, her shoulders collapsed and she whispered, "That's hers." The sound in the clearing was a raw, open thing. A gasp, then hushing, then low sobs that trembled the air. By then, the whole valley felt paused, like breath held and not released. Search plastered posters on telephone poles, and every drive-through speaker repeated the same message, "Call if you see anything." People who had been strangers gathered to look for pieces of 2 lives. They moved through the forest with flashlights and faith. They prayed out loud, and they whispered out of habit. They gasped, and the gasps became a chorus of people not ready to make peace with silence. At the end of Act 1, the facts are intimate and uncomfortable. 2 teens who left for an adventurous night out, who vanished from a known route. Families in shock. A small torn glove found that might be the first thread. No answers. Only the ache and the growing hush of a town that has learned the worst kind of weight. They searched until their voices were husks. Day turned into a routine of grids and coffee, of volunteers folding maps the same way and marking the same blank squares. K9 units ran until their feet ached. Volunteers swapped boots when blisters opened, and helicopter pilots circled the hollow turn like tired birds. Every lead was chased. Old logging roads, culverts, the creek line. People who'd never met the families learned their names by heart. Elena, Hannah, and learned to speak them so softly it sounded like prayer. Rumors did what rumors always do. They slotted into empty places and hardened. In the diner, a man who'd stopped to change a tire 2 miles from the trail said, "I saw headlights that night, out of sync with the road." Another voice, louder, scoffed, "Or someone's trying to be important." A teenager on the bus swore he'd seen backpacks abandoned near the creek. An older hiker said he found nothing but footprints that led nowhere. Conversations looped, then frayed, then looped again. People gasped at each new whispered possibility, then sighed when nothing panned out. Families kept vigil. Elena's father took to driving the dirt roads at midnight, hands on the wheel so tight his knuckles brightened. He'd park, cut the engine, and call her name until his voice wore thin. Hannah's mother taught herself the radio frequency for volunteer channels and listened all night for any stray mention. When a lead came in, a photo that might show a figure on the ridge, an anonymous tip about a campsite, hope flickered like a match and then guttered when evidence dried into nothing. Weeks bled into months. The official search wound down into maintenance checks and occasional patrols. The town marked the calendar with the date the girls vanished, and every year a small cluster of people walked the hollow turn in memory. But life's pressure weighs on everyone differently. Some volunteers returned to work, some stopped coming. The family's kitchens accumulated casseroles and then cooled. Plates sat longer on counters. Community members tried to do the kindness thing, drop off soup, light a candle. Because when facts are sparse, human rituals help. 5 years later, the land had mostly swallowed the noise. Moss crept over tire ruts. The side track Elena had touched grew a thick veil of new ferns. The town's shock simmered into a quiet ache, present, but edged with the routine of living. Posters faded on telephone poles. New people moved in, yet memory has its own stubbornness. For the families, each morning still started with the small hope that it would end with them returning. Then a camper found something. He was an honest sort of guy, mid-30s, beard not yet gray, a weekend wanderer who took roads with names nobody else used. He wanted quiet, a place to read and not be interrupted. He parked his rig near an old pullout and set off to clear his head, coffee in hand. He knew the hollow turn only by reputation, that old watch your step warning the rangers sometimes gave to city folk. He thought the place had a kind of hush that felt tidy enough for thinking. As he walked, his boots pushed aside the leaf litter, and the air smelled of late summer rain. He rounded a familiar moss-covered root, and his foot snagged on something that didn't belong to the forest floor. He crouched and brushed his glove against a scrap of fabric, then a second, then a small nylon strap. His hands found the corner of a weathered pack, tucked under a tangle of roots as if someone had slid it there and hoped no one would find it. His breath went thin and quick. He called the ranger on a shaky phone and, by habit, took pictures. He didn't shout. He didn't run. He took photos like someone pressed to prove something real, not to create a story. When rangers arrived, they closed the scene with a quiet, professional urgency. Photographs were taken. The area was cordoned off with bright tape that looked obscene against the muted greens. The pack's contents were simple and breaking. A well-worn map with notes in 2 different hands, a cheap watch stopped at a time that didn't match any record, a small scrap of glove blue enough that a parent might recognize a favorite color. Nothing cinematic, nothing to scream a theory, but the items were tactile and specific, the kind of evidence that makes people's memories tilt towards certainty. The discovery reopened the valley like a wound touching daylight. Word spread faster than the rangers could rotate shifts. Townsfolk dropped what they were doing. The diner filled with a raw intensity. People who'd once muttered, "They'll turn up," now gasped openly when they heard the news. A pack, here, now, after 5 years. Elena's father drove to the ranger station with hands that trembled and a coffee untouched in his grip. Hannah's mother came in with a paper bag of sandwiches and collapsed into a chair, hands on her face that shuddered like someone starting to cry without catching breath. Investigators moved cautiously. They treated the new items not as instant proof, but as threads to be cataloged. Tests began. Fibers, soil samples, handwriting comparison on the map notes. It's a slow mechanical justice. Lab work, chain of custody, careful photos under white light. But for families, that slowness is agony. Every hour of analysis stretches like taffy. Conversations turned sharp. On a crowded bench, 2 longtime volunteers argued under their breath. "Why here? Why now?" one whispered. "Maybe it was always here," the other answered. Maybe the rain finally washed it free. People gasped when the lab returned a result. The soil lodged in the pack's zipper matched strata from a drainage basin near the hollow turn, an odd, specific chemical signature that investigators had cataloged years ago. It suggested the pack had been here a long time, or that someone had been recently there and moved the evidence. An anonymous tip surfaced too, the kind that makes hairs stand on the back of your neck. Someone called a tip line and said, "You were looking in the wrong place. Look higher, near the old beech with the split trunk." It was the sort of clue that might be nothing. It might be everything. Rangers followed it with boots that felt heavier than before. Families felt their world rotate as the investigation shifted from the theoretical back to the real. The town's prayer vigils restarted. Strangers who'd forgotten to carry posters reached into drawers and found old flyers and spread them again. People gasped in recognition when the tiny blue glove scrap was matched by a faded photo on a missing person's flyer, a hand wearing that exact color. Through it all, the human undercurrent riffed: anger, grief, fragile hope. At the diner, a woman whispered maybe they left on purpose, and was hushed quickly by a man who'd lost his brother on the trail years before. He said, flat, they wouldn't leave their mothers like that. Tears were private at first, then public. The montage of community emotion. Hands clasped, voices hoarse, eyes wet, painted the valley with the small, terrible colors of a town that refuses to forget. As Act 2 closes, the camper's find has done what evidence does best. It reopened questions, pulled the memory back to the surface, and forced a community to look again. The pack is cataloged. The notes are being analyzed. The hollow turn is quieter now, but the quiet is different, charged, expectant, like a held note about to resolve. The search teams walked higher this time, past the switchbacks, past the old fire road where the map notes had stopped, past the point where hikers usually turned around because the trees grew too close, and the air felt heavy, like it didn't want company. The ranger leading the renewed sweep paused often, touching bark, studying moss, checking for impressions along the soil. They didn't expect a breakthrough. Nobody ever does after 5 years. But they moved like the valley was suddenly listening, as if their careful steps might coax something it had buried. The beech tree with the split trunk wasn't easy to find. You had to look at it from the right angle. Otherwise, it just looked like any other old pillar of wood. But when the team reached it, something subtle shifted. The ground was disturbed, not freshly, but recently enough to stand out from the surrounding growth. A shallow indentation. A depression in the leaves. A faint drag in the soil that didn't match animal prints. Not dramatic, just wrong enough to make people exhale sharply. They worked slowly, peeling back branches, then brush, then a layer of loosened earth. The forest didn't give up anything cleanly. It made them dig with patience, gloved hands brushing aside the stubborn layers of the past. Every inch forward revealed something human, too human. Fragments of fabric. A snapped plastic buckle. A single braid elastic, faded from bright teal to washed mint. The ranger whispered a quiet, "Oh no," under his breath, not shouted, not panicked. Just the sound of someone realizing they had stepped knee-deep into a family's worst unanswered question. They took everything gently, placing each piece in labeled bags. No dramatics. No sudden revelations. Just small, undeniable confirmations that Elena and Hannah hadn't simply walked away. Down in the valley, word spread before the reports even landed on desks. People gasped at the new evidence. The mothers arrived wearing expressions twisted between hope and dread. Elena's father gripped the sign-in desk like he needed the wood to stay standing. Hannah's mother kept repeating, "Just tell me what it means," even though nobody could. Not yet. Experts combed through the finds, fibers, soil, weathering patterns, all those tiny scientific things that seem cold until you realize they're the only tools that can speak for someone who can't. The analysis was slow, deliberate, exhausting. But one detail eventually rose to the surface like silt settling in clear water. The drag marks near the beech tree matched the pressure patterns of 2 people being carried, not walking. And not dragged by an animal either. The spacing was too symmetrical, the soil displacement too measured, human, intentional, coordinated. It didn't answer everything, but it rewired the timeline. Investigators pieced together a chilling possibility. The girls likely made it down the hollow turn, maybe even close to the highway, and then someone intervened. Someone who knew the terrain well enough to stash belongings, scatter misleading evidence, and move through the brush without leaving the kind of footprints amateurs leave behind. Someone who used the forest the way a craftsman uses a tool. In the town, whispers sharpened again. Someone at the diner muttered, "This valley has secrets older than any of us." A group of volunteers argued softly on the sidewalk, one saying the evidence pointed to a local, another insisting it felt more like a traveler passing through. Both theories sounded too real, and not real enough. Even after the case reopened formally, there was no villain to point at. No confession, no dramatic ending the way movies force stories to wrap neatly. Just a tightening circle of clues showing that the girls didn't vanish by misadventure, but by someone's hand. Families held vigils again, this time not with denial, but with a sharper, steadier kind of grief. The kind rooted in understanding rather than confusion. People squeezed hands, cried openly, and stood under candles that flickered in the light wind sweeping the valley. The ranger who found the braid elastic walked the trail alone one last time, not because protocol demanded it, but because some discoveries sit heavy on the soul. He paused near the split beech tree, adjusted his jacket sleeve, and whispered a soft apology to the quiet woods. Not for failing, but for being too late. And somewhere in that forest, the air shifted again, subtle, almost like breath, a final reminder that some places keep their truths in pieces, offering them back slowly, painfully, and never all at once. That is the weight of the Appalachian mystery. The girls were found only through fragments, but the full story remained tucked away, deep inside a place that never wanted to share it.